if someone is looking for a continuation, if you will, of Francis's pontificate, Cardinal Krajewski could be that man. No, he is not from Asia. He is from Poland. But in terms of Francis's vision of reaching the peripheries and the little ones in the kingdom of God, Krajewski has done just that.
Witam Państwa w kolejnym odcinku naszego programu Świat według Polski, w którym staramy się pokazać najważniejsze wydarzenia na świecie też z polskiej perspektywy. Dzisiaj Państwa i moim specjalnym gościem jest Richard Raho, amerykański teolog, watykanista, który łączy się z nami specjalnie z Chicago. Mr. Raho, thank you for finding time for this interview.
Thank you.
You have occasion to meet many times Pope Francis. Can you say something more about his maybe private view, how he was in private contact, in private conversation?
Pope Francis was not a haughty person or a proud person. I think that what you saw is what you got with Pope Francis. He was down to earth. He always made people feel at ease. He did not try to put on any airs about himself. He was as comfortable in St. Peter's Basilica as he was one-on-one. And so in private, you saw a gentle pastor who actually was a man who loved to joke around, but he was very good at putting people at ease. And that was my best experience of Francis.
So, in your opinion, what is the most important change introduced by the Pope Francis during his pontificate? Because we spoke about a lot of things, but what is the most important change from your perspective?
I think that Francis's inclusion in the Catholic Church in the last 12 years, he's used the expression todos, 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 everyone, everyone, everyone is welcome in the church. I also think that Francis has reached out to what he has called the peripheries, the existential peripheries of the entire globe. And I think what that has done is it has given a people a sense of belonging, inclusion, and he's also seen the church as a field hospital. Prior to his election, one of the general congregations that led up to the conclave that eventually elected Francis spoke about how, as a church, we could risk becoming self-referential, therefore becoming sick and turning in on oneself. And in hindsight, as that intervention of his was published, it became clear that that was one of the key moments where a lot of the cardinals started to consider that Francis may be the next pope. They had not gone into conclave yet, but I think that speech in and of itself was a precursor, if you will, to his election.
Can you say something more about the American reaction on the death of Pope Francis? Because millions of Americans are Catholic. Vice President J.D. Vance declared himself as a Catholic, and he was the last official who met the Pope Francis before death. So what is the American reaction? What's the most American comments around that about the pontificate of the Pope Francis, but also about his legacy?
The death of Francis comes at a crucial time politically in the U.S. We have just inaugurated a new president who, quite honestly, is at odds with Francis's vision for migrants and immigrants. And just days before Francis went into the hospital for bilateral pneumonia, he published a letter to the United States Catholic Conference of Bishops. And he was very clear in his stance about how migrants should be welcomed. And in that letter, he spoke about the Ordo Amoris, which Vice President J.D. Vance said should be our sort of governing way of reaching out to the other, the stranger, the migrant. But he said, you know, that's really not the way we operate. We operate based on the parable of the Good Samaritan. And it's ironic that that was one of the last missives that he published before going into the hospital. And then equally ironic was the fact that the last dignitary that he met was in fact J.D. Vance on Easter Sunday morning as Mass was taking place in St. Peter's Square. And so to your question, Peter, I think that there is sadness in certain sectors of the Catholic Church in the U.S., as there are around the world. With that being said, there is also a sense of caution and a bit of trepidation moving forward. What does the next conclave bring in terms of, you know, the continuation of Francis's vision for the Church? Or which way does the pendulum swing moving forward? And so I think that's very much at the forefront of people's minds right now, and specifically the U.S. cardinals that will be going into conclave in just a matter of days.
Maybe do you hear in U.S. media or U.S. public opinion about this last meeting, J.D. Vance and Pope Francis? We know about the topics, what they're talking about, because what we saw from the pictures, that was like very official meeting. That was, you know, maybe this is my personal perspective, but there was not meeting of the member of the Catholic Church with Pope, but mostly like dignitary official meet with the other official. So do we know something about this last meeting, you know, about the last topics? Maybe J.D. Vance comments something about it?
So prior to meeting Francis on Easter Sunday, he met with Cardinal Parolin, who is the Vatican Secretary of State, and Archbishop Gallagher, who is the Secretary of Foreign Relations for the Vatican. And the Vatican readout of that meeting simply said that the religious freedom was spoken about, war and peace issues were spoken about, but also the topic of migration did come up. And that was all that the Vatican said. The next day, when J.D. Vance met Pope Francis, it was a rather short, brief meeting. It was actually just prior to Francis's Urbi et Orbi blessing from the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica and his last ride, if you will, in St. Peter's Square. And so I don't know that there was a time to actually converse about anything in public policy. That probably would have been done the day before in his meeting with Cardinal Parolin.
If we talk about the conclave, what is your main prediction? As you know, like many experts, ordinary members of the Catholic Church ask the question about who could be the new Pope, which cardinal have the most like some kind of like the pole position in the conclave. So what is your main prediction about this process? Because the main thought what we hear in Poland, that the Pope Francis changed so much the collegium of the cardinals, and we can expect that someone who will be the following, someone who will continue the pontificate of the Francis. So what is your opinion about it?
You know, there's an old saying that he who goes into a conclave as Pope leaves as a cardinal. I think what people mean by that is that it's so difficult to predict. Who would have predicted Francis's election just 12 years ago? With that being said, though, I think that at this point in time, the general congregations that lead up to the conclave, which by my math could start no earlier than May 5th or 6th, the general congregations at which each cardinal is invited to give an intervention are going to be very, very important in terms of coalescing around a candidate. But in terms of where that candidate may come from, we know this. We know that in the 9 consistories for the creation of cardinals that Francis had during his pontificate, that he broadened he cast his net wide, so to speak. the global South has now become a major player in the conclave, but so has Asia, so has Africa. And so with that in mind, I think that the cardinals have a lot to do in terms of, one, getting to know each other. This is relatively, there are 135 cardinal electors, and not all of them know each other well. And so these meetings leading up to the conclave, whenever that should take place in the Sistine Chapel, to me are crucial, because the actual getting to know each other doesn't happen in the Sistine Chapel. It's only voting that happens there. But the actual coalescing around a particular candidate really takes place in the lead up to that conclave.
So the most emotional prediction in Poland is about the possible new pope from Africa. Do you think it's possible that one of the African cardinal could be the new pope?
Yes, but I also think anyone from Asia is fair game too. One of the names that is floated from Africa is Cardinal Turkson. Cardinal Turkson has been very much at the forefront of Francis's push toward the environment, the implication of Laudato Si, but also another name, and this one from Asia that has come up, is Cardinal Tagle, who is the former Archbishop of Manila and now the prefect for the dicastery for evangelization. In fact, he is nicknamed Baby Francis, or the Asian Francis. But again, we really don't know, and to predict is sometimes a loser's game, because again, what the discussions are once that conclave starts is not public domain. It won't be it won't be in the news. The cardinals take an oath of secrecy. Their cell phones are taken from them. And the idea that they are locked literally with a key into the Sistine Chapel is the notion that anything could come out of this. In terms of the election of a new pope, my prediction is that we're probably looking at a 4 to 5 day conclave. Francis was elected on the third day. But again, things can change. Has a pope ever been elected on a first ballot? No, I don't see that happening at all. But I think within time, the cardinals will begin to coalesce around a particular candidate, and eventually that candidate will emerge.
Do you think that the Trump administration will trying to influence in any way in the upcoming conclave, or maybe it's just political fiction, and this speculation is like completely false and completely fiction?
While the president of the United States has no direct influence in a conclave, his policies, to a certain extent, do. And I would say that one of the centerpieces of Francis's pontificate has been immigration. I mean, his first trip that he took as pontiff was to the island of Lampedusa, and where he greeted migrants there. And I think to a certain extent, the policies of the Trump administration will weigh heavy, not necessarily on just the American cardinals who go into conclave, but by extension, cardinals around the world. Because to be honest, Francis's vision for migrants is at odds right now with the administration in the US. So to your question, I think that yes, indirectly, those policies it will inevitably play a role in who is selected.
Yes, but from the other hand, US cardinals play a very important role. One of them announced the death of the Pope Francis. Also, some of them are on the list of Papabile, possible new Pope. So the US Catholic Church maybe can play very important role in this upcoming conclave, or not?
Absolutely, they can. Usually in a conclave, certain kingmakers, if you will, rise to the occasion, who will inevitably give an intervention, and the other cardinals will like what he has to say. And so, from Cardinal Tobin to Cardinal Supich here in Chicago, to Cardinal McElroy, the newly named Archbishop of Washington, D.C., who has been very adamant in terms of his support for immigration, and in terms of other cardinals in the U.S., I think that they will play a role. Do I see a future U.S. Pope? No, quite honestly. But again, who knows? I think in many parts of the world, the U.S. is seen as a superpower. It is a superpower, but is that what the papacy needs right now? Maybe not. But again, we don't know, and I think that's where we sort of have to urge some caution and work with what the Holy Spirit is providing for the church at this particular point in time.
Many of our viewers knowledge about the conclave take from the movies, from the TV series.
Yes.
Some of them from the Oscar-awarded Hollywood blockbuster Conclave, some of them from the TV series New Pope. And how different is what's happening in real life in Vatican during conclave is completely different to this movie image of this very important, like the most important moment from the Catholic Church hierarchy.
Sure. Not a lot, to be quite honest with you. I would say this. The one piece in conclave that captures rather accurately what must take place, not in the Sistine Chapel, but outside, over dinner, over conversations in closed quarters, is some sense of politics in terms of who might be that candidate. Because remember, conversations about who is the best candidate don't take place in the Sistine Chapel. That is simply a place for voting. The conversations about who is an emerging candidate take place outside the conclave, in the general congregations leading up to conclave, but also in private rooms around the Vatican and even in restaurants. There's a story told about the night of Francis's election, the night before Francis's election, where Francis was alone in the Piazza Navona in Rome, and someone noticed him and just came up to simply greet him. And Francis said to pray for him. And at that point in time, unbeknownst to us, he knew that the votes were going his way, and there was a possibility that he could be elected. And as it turned out, he was. But the world didn't realize that at the time. Francis told the story after his election. And he said when he sensed that things were getting dangerous, right? In other words, the votes were swinging his way. He felt the weight of that. And you can imagine that whoever Francis's successor is will feel the same way, because even though they know the votes are heading in that way, the general public will not.
Of course, we don't know the surname of the new Pope, but maybe we can ask the question about the new path of the Catholic Church. That, in your opinion, is it possible that the Catholic Church will go to the more liberal, more progressive way, or maybe more conservative way? And how this depends from the Pope character or Pope personality? Maybe some of the changes will go on even without of the permission of the Pope, or maybe Pope influence too much that maybe liberal, a very progressive way from the Pope Francis will stop from the new conservative, very right-wing Pope.
Sure. Well, I think in terms of the makeup of the College of Cardinals, you have to consider, first of all, the fact that Francis has appointed, by and large, a significant number of them. But in terms of their theology and their vision for the church, as I mentioned, we don't know a lot about that. But I will say this, that if we are looking for a continuity candidate, a Francis II, if you will, well, then I believe that the Cardinals will move in that direction. But let's face it, there is a certain resistance, a small but very loud voice, a minority in the church, but it's a loud minority that would like a more conservative pope at this point in time. And so the pendulum sometimes does swing. But to take it back to John Paul, obviously a native of Poland, when Cardinal Ratzinger preached at John Paul's funeral in St. Peter's Square, many cardinals will say that the homily that he gave for John Paul in the square was the defining moment, if you will. And when many cardinals actually started to coalesce around then Pope Benedict. And so small things right now that maybe would not be noticed by us are being watched by other cardinals. And so to your question, to play the game of, let's try to guess, it's almost a futile game, I think. I think that what the church is looking for right now is someone with the vision of Francis, someone whose emphasis is on migration, and someone whose emphasis continues to be to reach out to the peripheries. The other piece is this: the fact that Francis really was active until the very end, I think will also play a role in this conclave. The fact that the day before his passing, he gave the Urbi et Orbi from the loggia at St. Peter's. He took his last ride, we didn't know it at the time, in St. Peter's Square. And so he was very active in the governance of the church, as opposed to an ailing pope who was out of sight. Yes, he was out of sight for 38 days in the hospital, but when he was released from the hospital, there were surprise appearances by him that were taking place. And so I think the very fact that he governed till the end will play a significant role in terms of who is elected at this particular time in the church.
I want to end our interview with a question about Poland, because many Poles think that Poland play a very important role in Catholic Church at all. Of course, especially if you look to the past from the John Paul II pontificate. But from your perspective, that the Poland is an important country, if you talk about the Catholic Church, worldwide Catholic Church, or maybe it's like, from this perspective, small European country, because the Asian, African, South African churches, bishops, cardinals play much more important role.
One of the key players at the Vatican who retains his role is the papal almoner, who happens to be Cardinal Krajewski. He is one of the only Vatican officials who doesn't have to resign upon the Pope's passing. Cardinal Krajewski has been sent to Ukraine to deliver ambulances and supplies. He has been the charitable work, if you will, of Pope Francis. And if someone is looking for a continuation, if you will, of Francis's pontificate, Cardinal Krajewski could be that man. No, he is not from Asia. He is from Poland. But in terms of Francis's vision of reaching the peripheries and the little ones in the kingdom of God, Krajewski has done just that and has continued to do that as well. And so, again, nothing is off the table. But I think, to your question, when you look at the Church of Poland, the name that eventually comes to mind is Cardinal Krajewski. And what does his vote mean in the conclave that will happen within the next month?
Thank you for this very interesting interview. Państwa i moim gościem był Richard Raho, amerykański teolog, watykanista, który specjalnie połączył się z nami z Chicago. Thank you very much for this very in-depth conversation, and I think maybe in the middle of May we will discuss about the new Pope. I'm very interested about your thoughts about it.
Thank you very much, Peter. I would enjoy an opportunity to do the same.